You're always looking to buy in your dynasty leagues, and we're here to talk about some receivers that you need to be thinking about if these are considerations on today's show. It is the Audible Cecil, Lammey, Sigmund, Bloom, and Bloom. We're going to start with one of our favorites in Drake London. Now, you're thinking, well, wait a second, buy? He's already been bought. Like, no one's going to get
Mhm.
rid of him. Well, maybe, because I look at what Zach Robinson's going to do with that offense with Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix, and I see him as the largest beneficiary. Yes, even more so than Kyle Pitts. Pitts might see that bump in touchdowns because he doesn't really score touchdowns, but I think London can see the largest bump here.
Yeah, I can see that London at least so we can look at the lens of best ball drafts, and London is going in the early mid second round. So people that are drafting in best ball leagues right now, they believe that Kirk Cousins is going to greatly increase his value. But and I'm not saying he's going to hit Justin Jefferson elite territory, but there's still room above, say, what's London's ADP right now, about like 15. There's still
Mhm.
room for him to be above that, to uh, be an overachiever from that. If Kirk Cousins is sound, and then like you said, Cease, from a dynasty standpoint, we're looking beyond this year with Michael Penix. And look, whatever you think about the pick of Penix and whether they should have done it, so on and so forth, if you're looking at it strictly through the wide receiver fantasy football lens, he got 3 wide receivers drafted, or the 3 wide receivers got him drafted, depending on how you look at it. The point is, the numbers were there. And think about that maybe for Seattle's offense for another topic, another episode. But I think that London still has room to grow. And again, writing buy low, sell high every week during the season is flipped in the last few years to buy high and sell low. In other words, yeah, people are getting in on London, but what feels like an overpay right now, just like taking him in the second round, could look like a value a few weeks into the season.
Yeah, and let's jump Seattle right now. Like,
Yeah.
I still have a few thoughts on London, but let's tie this in because Jaxon Smith-Njigba was on our list of dynasty buys right now. And part of it comes from thinking about that offense with those 3 wide receivers, right? And we'll get into that, Bloom. But also on our Football Guys newswire back on Friday, it talked about how he's pleased the team with improved practice habits. Okay,
Hmm.
JSN,
Hmm.
improved practice habits. All right, I like the sounds of that, along with that talent, along with that offense. Hell yeah, that means buy.
I can see him as that post hype buy because uh, Smith and Jigba, the value momentum has slowed down because Tyler Lockett's still on the team, right? And the reason he's a dynasty buy just on the surface is everybody was anticipating maybe the team would move on from Lockett. They didn't yet, but it's going to happen. Smith and Jigba is going to get to be a primary option while he's on his rookie contract there. And Geno Smith, I think, is underrated. This offense with Grubb calling the shots is underrated. Uh, so I do think that Smith and Jigba could see some value growth. But let's go back to that the news item Cease, because I think that we have to remember in the off season sometimes what do you call them? Cease complissalts,
Compulsals, yeah.
complissalts. Sometimes when you're trying to say something positive about a player, you're revealing something negative, right? What's it contained in there? Smith and Jigba's practice habits maybe not so great as a rookie, not a great indicator. Now, change is, we can reverse that. But if you feel like Smith and Jigba underachieved last year, then maybe that's part of the reason why. And here's a way it can change with growth as a player. But also at the same time, I think that he's a classic glass half full, glass half empty player because there's a lot of metrics, a lot of analytics saying he was getting open or he should have gotten more looks. But then there's also this idea that he should have stood out more than he did if he was going to be the kind of player that was going to make a big impact early in his career. But it hasn't happened yet. So if it does, this will look like a buy low moment. But if he doesn't stand out this year, if he doesn't force Seattle to make his role bigger in the offense, maybe this will be a moment that you should have sold high.
Right. And if you think you're paranoid, well, that's going in your file.
Mhm.
I've always loved that. But I look at it with him and the complisalt of like, all right, now receivers, sometimes it takes 3 years. Herman Moore, Marvin Harrison. I should probably have more recent references than those two, but sometimes it takes 3 years to get going. So with JSN, we know that talent is there. The opportunity will continue to grow. And for me, that means where's my entry point? Can I get JSN at a good price? If the answer is yes, then my answer is yes. Buy, buy, buy all the time. Not buy, buy yet. Still got plenty of players to talk about here. Let's discuss what's going on with Jalen Tolbert, shall we? As
Mhm.
we've been waiting, Bloom. What's
Right.
the prognosis for Jalen Tolbert this year? Because we've been excited about him before. Are we still? Is that excitement still there?
We should be. Yeah. And this was a guy, and we look at this stuff, look at CJ Stroud and Tank Dell, right? It wasn't quite as strong an affinity, but absolutely there were indications after the Cowboys took Jalen Tolbert in the third round that either Dak Prescott had some input or that the pick pleased him. And rookie year Tolbert, you might say after his first camp in preseason that maybe his draft status was the only reason he made the team. If he was a fifth, sixth round pick, maybe he wouldn't have made the team. But he comes around in year two. And see, if you're talking dynasty buys, then this is one of those situations where, okay, Brandon Cooks is still there. Brandon Cooks is perceived as the number two option. Certainly, when Dak Prescott took off, Cooks had some big games in the second half of the year. But
Sure.
Tolbert was starting to overtake Michael Gallup, right? If you're looking at the writing on the wall that Michael Gallup wasn't going to be with the team this year, it was already happening in the second half of the year last year. Tolbert entering year three, potentially ascending player. And then also you're looking at this Dallas pass offense as the offense, right? I mean, come on. Ezekiel Elliott sees, do you take Ezekiel Elliott or Rico Dowdle in drafts? How about neither? Right? How about the
Right.
answer is
Right.
neither? And when you
Mhm.
think about projecting this offense, this is a Dak. This is why you're waiting to pay Dak Prescott in a moment when he's poised to put up the best stats of his career because he has to for this team to be successful. And Jake Ferguson, Jalen Tolbert, these are young ascendant players. Jake Ferguson's another guy we can talk about as a dynasty buy, even though he's not a receiver, because Luke Schoonmaker already hurt again. So
Yep.
it looks like Ferguson is going to be a bigger part of this offense. So you can see the direction with the younger players taking on bigger roles. Maybe Brandon Cooks, his best football is behind him. We know CD Lamb's going to hopefully get paid and certainly get fed in this offense. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for more than one overachiever in this offense this year. And we'll look at Tolbert very different a few weeks into the season.
Now, Bloom, I have to admit, I
Mhm.
put Michael Wilson on this list just because I love him. And I go back to the Senior Bowl where he was dominant. And I look to now, like, all right, as they continue to show confidence in Kyler Murray, what does that mean for Michael Wilson? So if you
Mhm.
disagree with this one, I get it. I get it. And I'm also showing my bias. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
biased because
Mhm.
I fell in love in Mobile, Alabama with
Right.
some guy named Michael Wilson. And we're still waiting. We're still waiting. As Opal's waiting to get fed. We're still waiting for Wilson to really showcase that full ability.
Yeah, the show within the show. I forgot to feed her. We figured out that if I just feed her before the show, she won't bother me. But I forgot. But everyone forgot about Michael Wilson. Everybody forgot
Uh,
about Michael Wilson too. That's Michael Wilson, my cat. If you're watching on YouTube, yes, we've got cat content. Uh, then you see Michael Wilson jumping back in the picture because Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride. These are the primary targets in this pass offense. But Michael Wilson is a good player. Michael Wilson is a player that came out as a pretty refined, advanced wide receiver for a college wide receiver, who missed a lot of time with injuries. And that's the other thing. If you look at him as a third round pick, that means that as a player, he's probably a second round pick because the durability concerns certainly depressed his draft stock. So I guess the question for Wilson becomes, we just talked about Dak Prescott. In that passing game, he can support two, three, maybe even four options in fantasy football. Can Kyler Murray support three? Because if he can, it's very likely that Michael Wilson is that third guy. And he's a very technically sound receiver, and he's a receiver that can execute consistently so that if defenses are concerned with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison, and Michael Wilson is the guy who has to make plays, he can make those plays. So I can see that if you like Kyler Murray, if you like Drew Petzing, it's another thing. This offense actually showed some signs of life with not great quarterback play last year. If Kyler Murray can tap into that 1 year removed from his injury, in some ways, picking up Michael Wilson on the cheap is basically saying this offense is going to exceed expectations, and he's going to be part of the reason why.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you with defensive adjustments. You're going to spend a lot of attention on Marvin Harrison Jr. because if you don't, he'll kill you. Like
Hmm.
that's the thing. This may be we've entered the Ezekiel Elliott Rico Dowdle section of the show because I'm going to bring up KJ Osborn. Don't throw anything at me. Don't throw any
Hmm.
cat food at me or empty
Hmm.
cat bowls. Um, I just look at New England. I'm like, I don't really want anybody from this team in this offense. And then I look at the passing game. I was like, wait a second. KJ Osborne's there. And in a lottery ticket way of like much, much lower expectations, right? This is Powerball, not, you know, the raffle at your bake sale or whatever. Like, all right, I understand. This may not be a buy at all whatsoever, but that's part of the debate. KJ Osborne
Hmm.
there with New England. Everyone else is. I want to be kind. Sorry, Joe.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you know, it's not great, Bob, in New England. Could KJ Osborne show anything there?
Why not? Well, no. Listen, here's what it stands for. No, seriously, here's what it stands
Okay.
for. Okay, here's what it stands for. Um, what do you think of Jacoby Brissett? What do you think of Drake May?
Right.
Who do
Right.
you think is going to start week 1? Who do you think is going to start most of the season? Um, the offensive line's not great. And there's a reason that we're lukewarm about New England in general. The offensive line has a couple of big question marks right now. Cole Strange's injury, and at least one other spot, I think. Uh, you have Alex Van Pelt, right? Alex Van Pelt, who wasn't good enough for Cleveland, who, by the way, hired Ken Dorsey, who wasn't good enough for Buffalo. Not exactly, again, optimism here. You're trying to get out of the Belichick dark ages, right? In terms of offensive football. Seriously, it was a debacle. The post Brady Patriots offense. Yeah, there was this moment that everyone said, "Hey, Mac Jones might be pretty good," but yeah, it was a total debacle. Lots of different people fingerprints on that. You're trying to come out of that, and see. I think that the rational approach, if you're the Patriots and you're Jared Mayo, is to go with Jacoby Brissett for as long as you can in this season. I did
Hmm.
see Mike. He said, "Ouch." See, how many times have you heard Mike Reese say "ouch" when he's writing? Because right now the Patriots have the highest implied odds after the schedule is released, and they could do schedule strength in addition to the calculations. Threw it in there. The Patriots have the highest implied odds to pick number 1 next year. Ouch.
Ouch, indeed.
That's Mike Reese, who's one of the true beat writer that all beat writers should try to be like. I think you think the Patriots think of Mike Reese and ESPN. So if it's Jacoby Brissett, well, guess what? Jacoby Brissett wasn't too bad as a passer. Jacoby Brissett, here's what we've seen from Jacoby Brissett as a starting quarterback recently. He can support one or two options.
Sure.
He's a competent passer. Okay, Jacoby Brissett is going to be competent, and you would hope that Alex Van Pelt is going to be competent in at least making this offense, have some punch. So then you look at the Patriots wide receiver group. This is where it gets funny, Cease. So after the 150th pick in your early best ball drafts, and this is the order they're going off the board, but it doesn't really mean anything. Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Demario Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, who, remember, Kendrick Bourne was actually fantasy relevant last year before he went down with the ACL tear. Well, can he do that year removed? Then KJ Osborne, then Juju Smith-Schuster. And you have here 4 slot guys, basically, in
Hmm.
Douglas kind of leveled off last year. Again, Juju, he says he's 100% after he was like 60% last year. Do we trust that? Yeah, I think we can reverse engineer that story that Juju's knee, for a young man, he had an old man's knee, and that's why he didn't really make much money in free agency. So we're not counting on him. Again, Kendrick Bourne, another slot guy, he is coming off an ACL tear. Almost by process of elimination, it's Osborn. And then you have the two outside rookies in Polk and Baker. I like Baker, but I also think that it's very much getting ahead of ourselves to expect any rookie wide receiver in this kind of offense that's going to be just scraping it out. I mean, Jacoby Brissett's going to want some sort of veteran execution. That's KJ Osborne. So that's the
Yeah.
best. That's the best story I can tell. But I do think that overall, again, this is it's like the car. The New England offense is the car that stalled out in the ditch on the side of the road, and they're just trying to get it out of the ditch. I mean, we'll start moving in a year or two if we don't ruin Drake May.
Yeah, just pop the clutch. If it's a manual, you can start it. You just get it rolling. Gotta
Yeah.
get it rolling. It's gonna be wild and interesting, but if they had the number 1 pick, not to derail the show, I'd take another quarterback.
Yeah. It's like speaking of
And
Kyler
I
Murray.
like
Yeah.
Gerard
Caleb.
Mayo, but I
Mhm.
have no idea why they took Drake May. And when I had heard that and I'd said it on this show, like, I don't know if I believe that because they weren't saying that before. They were saying, like, move back in the end of the first for
Yeah.
Michael Penix, which wouldn't have worked either.
Right.
But you have a gimme year. Your first year as a head coach, unless you're Nathaniel Hackett,
Yeah. Well,
you got a gimme year.
it's a good discussion because you don't want to force it, and I don't know exactly what the final offer. What did they say it was? Like two firsts and something else from Minnesota. But I do wonder, Cease, if in house, because sometimes teams are keen and have good self scouting and self awareness, and sometimes they don't. And it's hard to say because this is a new regime, a new New England.
Right.
If they kind of understood in house, if they had their own calculations or their own outlook to say, like, yeah, we're looking at our roster, we're looking at where we're at right now, and we're going to win 4 games. We're going to win 3 games this year, probably. Look at like who's the implied favorite in each game on the schedule and things like that. Because if you have that knowledge, Cease, you're right to say, then you really don't feel like you have. Because what are we saying about Penix in Atlanta? Well, they're not going to be picking that high in the draft again soon. They just got Cousins. But if you're the Patriots, you're expecting to pick high in the draft soon again, then you don't have to force the pick. But they did.
They did. Thanks, Robert Kraft. A couple of more to wrap up today's show, and just throwing darts, but again, when you can buy at a low entry point, I'm thinking of the speed of Trey Palmer.
Hmm.
I'm thinking how Tampa kept everything together, and of course, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Now, Jalen McMillan is there, and I love him.
Hmm.
There we go back to our Michael Penix thing. Like, I love McMillan, love his game. So he's like going to be better than Trey Palmer, but Palmer's got the edge of experience for now, and he's got a ton of speed. So again, entry point Bloom. I look at that offense. I like that they kept it together. A couple of older receivers in front of him. And yeah, the kid, the rookie's better than he is, but I'll take a chance on Trey Palmer, especially if I miss out on Jalen McMillan.
I think from a dynasty standpoint, he's the reason Trey Palmer's worth mentioning or the situation's worth mentioning is that Chris Godwin's going to be a free agent next year.
Yeah.
So you have opportunity, and you mentioned Jalen McMillan. Maybe it's Jalen McMillan, who's pretty underrated in fantasy drafts, right? And rookie drafts. He's potentially a dynasty buy. It's rare that we say that a rookie is a dynasty buy in the season of rookie drafts because that's when nobody wants to trade them. But even an overpay for him right now, as somebody that is projects as a savvy replacement for Chris Godwin down the line, because why would you want to get into this offense? Well, maybe we underestimated Baker Mayfield. You know who I just talked to, Cease, who said
Mm,
he's still a fan of Baker Mayfield and has really stood by him and think he's underrated. Doug Farrar. Doug
love
Farrar's
it.
a Baker Mayfield guy. So, and with Liam Cohen, who took the job in Tampa partially so that he could be reunited with Baker Mayfield, that's where the Baker Mayfield resurgence starts with the Rams, with Liam Cohen. So maybe we're just underestimating this offense and this passing game in general, something that can continue to get better. And some young player, whether it's McMillan or Palmer, Bucky Irving becomes interesting if we see this as an ascendant offense.
Right. Final guy we're going to talk about, and a couple of reasons why. Again, the physical talent is there, and the physical talent is so easy to see with Treylon Burks. I don't need to know about physical talent. I need to know about health status and work ethic, Bloom.
Hmm.
And then I think of the two guys ahead of him on the depth chart, and I was like, okay, well, they're old. So is there an opportunity there? And then I think, well, maybe it just doesn't work in Tennessee because he was supposed to be their Debo and all these sorts of comparisons that were tossed out about Treylon Burks when he was drafted. And it's not. Um, and I should know the character's name, but he's not Debo. He's the dude that got his chain stolen and got his beach cruiser. Hey, what bike, punk? Like he's that dude from Friday. So whatever that dude's name is, that I think he worked for UPS or something like that. You got caught stealing boxes. Anyway, will you be stealing boxes or stealing value if you add Treylon Burks? Because I think okay, two guys up top of him are old, and then I think, well, maybe he just needs a fresh start.
Yeah, that's the thing. He gets a clean slate, totally new regime. You have positive stuff coming out. You have players saying good things about him. And we, like you said, Cease, we know the physical talent is there. And I guess the Treylon Burks question is, I mean, he's available for 10 cents on the dollar based on what he's
Yeah.
cost in rookie drafts. So he's just classically, if you think of it as an investor, Cease, I know you're an investor. I'm not, I'm a fool. I'm the fool, and a fool and his money are soon parted. But Treylon Burks is the kind of investment, like the post hype first rounder, third year. Everybody's treating him and valuing him like, well, we already know he's a bust. That's it.
Right.
Case closed.
Right.
It's over. Treylon Burks is a bust. But if you take a closer look at what's going on, first of all, at least you have the opportunity for a reversal of the trend, and you have some positivity coming out. Now, his role's not going to be that big in the offense with Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins, but again, we're just trying to get forward momentum to unlock all that physical talent. Because if we go back and we look at Treylon Burks, he's a player. First of all, he was drafted to replace AJ Brown. Jeez,
Yeesh.
that's a
Good
lot
luck.
of weight to carry right
Mhm.
away in a backwards offense. Let's face it, it was a backwards. It's Derrick Henry offense, a backwards kind of offense in terms of development of offensive passing game pieces. Okay, this was not a team that was going to they don't have a track record. Oh yeah, the wide receiver factory of Tennessee. No. So Burks, we knew, was again the physical talent, but not the refined product. Kind of like Quentin Johnston right now out with the Chargers. And this is another one sees where people are asking, like, is it time to get in on Johnston? Because of how disappointed everybody is in him right now. So I think if you like Will Levis and you think he can get this passing game going, Bill Callahan, got to mention that as part of the story always, to get this offensive line, which was one of the obstacles to this passing game getting going, then there could be something here. And we could be looking at Burks, if that physical talent flashes on Sundays, as an ascendant player looking to, see, so we're going to be talking about his a fifth year option. And as a
Mhm.
player that is worth that fifth year option with wide receiver salary skyrocketing.
You want an ascending fantasy team? Well, then you check out footballguys.com. You sign up for our free daily newsletter every morning, hot and fresh to your inbox. It is our free newsletter with all the top stories from around the world of fantasy football with our takes as well. It's the footballguys.com free daily newsletter available at footballguys.com. You want to help the show, support the show. We don't do any silly super chats. Pay me to put your comment on the screen. Instead, we just ask, hey, best way to support the show is subscribe to footballguys.com. A great price, and we appreciate you for doing that. This is our 19th season of the Audible, and we certainly appreciate you for helping to support our business in footballguys.com. He's Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned, and would you please also check out these other videos? And as well, stay frosty, baby.